So you're the founder and chief strategist at Smart Brand, correct?
Yes, well, I'm a brand and experience strategist,
Yep.
and the framework or the approach that I use to help folks build a brand, understand, attract the right audience, and really build a brand is the smarter brand approach. And
Oh,
it's approach that I've used for my that I've developed over my 15 years career building brands from PUMA to startups and entrepreneurs. So I know it works.
all right. So you start now. Okay, that's perfect. So to explain to people listening what Smarter Brand is, and
Mhm.
then how. And then the second question is, with your experience. I mean, you went. This is pretty crazy. Pfizer and Puma and Mercedes-Benz. Like that's three completely different things. So let's talk about your approach, and then let's talk
Sure.
about that's amazing that you jumped at three different companies. So that's so much experience. So let's talk about your
It is.
approach first.
It is, yeah. I mean, and that's how the smarter brand approach came to fruition. I started off a number of years ago as a lot of young bucks that come out of school, at high school and college, and they want to create stuff and put it out in the world, and they have a lot of ideas. And initially my penchant was more for the design side. Over time, I realized that as I worked with brands like Puma and Pfizer and Mercedes-Benz, as you mentioned, I realized that what we see as a consumer is just a tip of the iceberg. Really is that planning, that strategy that goes into it. A lot of the sitting in boardrooms, kind of looking at insights and all those kinds of things. That's what really makes the output, which is the design or the experience that you experience, impactful. So with that, I said to myself, well, I'm kind of on the wrong part of the trajectory there for the brand building. Because if we're making decisions and we're understanding our customers before we decide on what we're doing and how we're getting out in the world, then I want to be on that table. I want to be having those kind of conversations to really understand the intricacies of how the relationship builds. And that's kind of where I ended up in the strategy side. And over the years, I've worked with a number of different brands and a number of startups and entrepreneurs. And about 3 years ago, I said to myself, well, why is it that a brand like Puma, who has a huge budget, and one of my clients, Swatchon, which is an emerging brand out of South Korea, what makes them different besides budget, right? These days they're both trying to offer an experience. They both try to reach customers. How can I take how can I eliminate the budget part about it and really whittle down the process down to something that's succinct, that it, regardless of the size of the company and the resources that it has, they're able to still build that experience and that connection with the customer. And that's kind of what something that I put down on paper, and I'm calling it the smarter brand. And that's the approach that I use formally.
How are you dealing with the size, scope, and scale of the spectrum and the arbitrary and capricious nature of marketing today, that our content could and our story could end up anywhere?
Yeah, I mean, that's a reality that we live in. And, as you mentioned, authenticity is really what drives that emotional engagement and for your audience to choose you. So we have a world that's changing daily, considering even in the last week. And then to your point, you still have to maintain that authenticity. I think one of the main things about that is understanding who you are, and within that, understanding how the audience is changing. To your point, and I've worked with a number of brands that are actually trying to enter into the US, for instance. One brand was from Korea, as I mentioned, and they said, "Oh, we want to sell to the US market. We've been selling in Korea, South Korea, and this is the product." And it wasn't hitting. It wasn't resonating. And once I started engaging with them, I said, "Well, give me a customer profile. Who are your customers, X, Y, and Z?" And one thing that they were missing in their story is the culture part. Right? And culture, you can have a story and the story takes a different meaning, or the product takes a different meaning based on the cultural nuances, right? What they're used to, how they're used to purchasing, how they're used to engaging, how you build trust. Sometimes in some cultures it's face to face or nothing, right? In the US here, we could kind of do behind, we're a little bit more used to kind of this distance and barriers between individuals. But in some cultures, like I was born in Ghana, West Africa, and pretty much to this day, you cannot close a deal or form a relationship without actually physically seeing that person. Going there, breaking bread with them, and talking business. You can't jump right into it, right? And that's the cultural nuances, right? You can't just say, okay, this is what we're going to do, and X, Y, and Z. So having an understanding of what the identity is, who you're trying to talk to, the story you're trying to tell, but then also the nuances of the experience and how you engage is what makes brands and initiatives successful. And that's an ongoing thing. And you have to have the tools and the discipline to constantly look at that and analyze that and be measuring that impact, as you mentioned, David.